I'm going to talk about cloud, where in fact the rest of the session is going to be about cloud. This was a project that really started about 3 years ago when we started a government-funded project together with Industrial Light and Magic, probably about 3 years ago. And it was part of ILM's setup, in fact, of their London studio where they did a lot of the Star Wars effects. And we were trying to answer a number of things in this project about cloud. So number one was, can we think about flexibility? How can we think about a world where a pipeline, you don't have to invest in upfront hardware. You don't have to do capacity planning. You can think of this flexible resource being the cloud. How can we work in that kind of environment? We also thought about collaboration. What could the cloud bring in terms of collaboration? Could we have many, many freelancers working around the world, all sharing one true source of the truth, shared data center that everybody can work from? We also thought about, well, what could this idea of unlimited compute bring to workflows and effects? Are there new workflows that perhaps are enabled by the cloud that previously were not possible? So these were the kind of things that we tried to answer in that funded project, and I think we got to a pretty good answer on those. And we're really pleased to say that we've taken that funded project and turning it into something that we're going to productize and bring out to you guys later this year. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session is 3 different sections. The first one is going to be with Simon Pickles, who's the lead on the Elara project. He's going to give you a run-through of how Elara has been used on a visual effects short film, end-to-end. Then we're going to hear from Buzz Hayes from Lightro. Buzz is going to explain how the light field cinema camera works and how the post-production workflow in the cloud has enabled their technology to really shine. And then thirdly, we're going to have a panel of the speakers that you heard from so far, plus a few extra guests. We've got Austin from Steelhead, and we've also got Matt, ex-Amazon now working for the Foundry, to also talk about cloud. So I've done enough talking. I'm going to pass it over to Simon now, who's going to introduce to you the Elara cloud-based service and show you some really cool things. Go, Simon.
That helped. Thank you, John. Thank you. All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen, early adopters, innovators, and visionaries. My name's Simon Pickles. I'm the lead engineer on a project at the Foundry called Pipeline in the Cloud. Today, we'd like to introduce Elara. Elara is a powerful cloud-based service for post-production. Elara centralizes infrastructure, creative tools, and pipeline. So setting up a VFX studio is hard, but with Elara, all you need to do is log in. The only tool you need is a web browser, and I think most of us have access to one of those. So what is Elara? Well, it's quite simple, really. It's a studio in a box. It features everything you need to run a post house available on demand. It's a virtual studio with professional tools delivered from the public and private cloud directly to you, accessible with a few clicks, but also with a pipeline set up to work for you, and with a dynamic render farm at your disposal. Elara is backed by near infinite resource of flexible storage and compute power. So you can get a job and then scale as you need to get the job done. Elara is also a collaboration platform. By centralizing the apps and data in the cloud, your team are truly working together, even if they're miles apart. And it's also secure by nature. There's no longer any need to share sensitive project data with a remote collaborator. By running the apps alongside the data, all your collaborators ever receive is a pixel stream. But Elara is also an analytics engine. We provide unheard of visibility into the way that your team works. With Elara, everything becomes an operational expense. You start to understand your projects with real depth. Elara uses the cloud as a hub, making multi-site operations and distributed working a breeze. It's kind of all about like warm, fluffy togetherness. When your infrastructure is 100% elastic and your team is 100% dynamic, then this allows us to do post-production in a totally new way. Now, for an example of that, think about capacity planning. You no longer have to plan with static infrastructure in mind. It's gone, it's done with. Elara gives you the power of ultimate flexibility. But working in the cloud shouldn't be any sort of compromise. And we believe that the Elara offering provides the performance and innovative features that the next generation of VFX studios demand. In short, Elara lets you focus on being an artist. So if you work on your own or in a small team, then you can let Elara be your virtual office, your kind of funky warehouse studio in the cloud. Oh, but you will have to bring your own coffee, however. Let's think for a moment about the ramifications of that. I mean, if anyone has the skills, or if they want to learn the skills to use the software, they can set up in business instantly. It's incredibly democratizing. Or how about a virtual post house that exists only for the duration of a project before disbanding and reforming in a new way, just as is typical with many production companies today? Or what about if you're running on local infrastructure and you're bursting at the seams? Use Elara to burst into the cloud. We provide an open platform of which you can use all of it or part of it as you see fit. So we talked a little bit about starting a studio, and running a studio is complex and time-consuming. Many of these challenges will probably resonate with some of you here today. But it doesn't have to be this way if you work smarter with Elara. Perhaps one of the most compelling aspects is the end of geography. Your studio can finally follow the sun with contributors from all around the globe. You can add collaborators in seconds, and they can be contributing immediately. You're actually bringing the artist to the data. So some of these problems of collaboration and organizing data across a multi-site operations just really kind of disappear when the cloud is your hub. And when you choose to render at scale, and you will, you can do so without having to upload all your data. After all, it's already there. But it's not just about the pure cloud experience that we're sharing here today. Elara can be your interface to the cloud to extend your on-premise infrastructure. We have APIs to allow flexible integration into your existing pipeline. You can even use Elara data with local apps. So let Elara demystify the cloud for you. Let it simplify your business. Let it give you access to apps, licenses, render power, and storage, all from a range of providers, and all with a single bill at the end of it. Elara can be the studio management tool that you've always wanted. It can centralize software provision, give you detailed resource controls and access, and it can provide the business intelligence that you need, from high-level usage right down to low-level efficiencies. I mean, I hope you agree that's pretty compelling stuff, but it's probably enough with the 10,000-foot view. I think what you guys really want to see is actually how Elara works in action. So I'd like to introduce Nathan. Nathan's going to take us on a walkthrough of the Elara experience today. We're going to show how a project using Elara can coordinate a team working across the globe with members in LA, London, and Vancouver. Over to you, Nathan.
Thank you, Simon. Hello, I'm Nathan Strong. I'm a visual effects supervisor and a creative specialist at Foundry. When my friends over at AFI contacted me to do the visual effects for this film, Unremarkable, I jumped at the chance. I'd like to thank the director, Jared Anderson, for contacting me and for letting us use these assets in this project. So let's take a look at one of the shots from the film. This shot is a great example for Elara. In this demonstration, our team is in multiple locations, and we utilized Nuke Studio, Nuke, Moto, Mary, Katana, V-Ray, and Houdini. So in a second here, we're going to jump into Elara, and I'm going to show you why it made this project so efficient. I'm going to start by logging in. As you can see, I'm just using a web browser here. This is really powerful, because I'm actually only going to be using a web browser during this whole entire presentation. It means I could be using any computer, and I could be working from anywhere in the world. I don't need a high-powered computer. I'm going to log in, and I'm going to be brought to my organizations page. This is where I can manage my personal Vfx company, and I can see the other VFX organizations which I might be a part of. I'm going to start by creating a new VFX company for this project. I'm going to go to Create Org down here on the left, and I'm going to name it Nathan FX. I like the sound of that. I can attach an image which represents my company. I've put a lot of thought into this, and I think this pretty much sums up Nathan FX. So now that I've created a new organization, I can manage it. Organizations are made up of projects and of people. I'm going to add some new members. I'm going to add my lighting artist, Simon, over here. Thank you, Simon, for contributing to this project. When I add Simon to the project, to my organization, it's going to become available when he logs into his Elara page. I'm going to add a few more artists here. I have a compositor, and I have a producer that I'd like to add too. So now that I have some artists, I can manage their permissions. This is really important because you might want your producer to come in and be able to add projects, delete projects, add more users, whereas your day-to-day compositor should only be able to come in and update your projects. Elara also allows you to control quotas. Quotas are important because Elara can tap into the almost unlimited resources of the cloud. I can configure quotas to set limits for the people working on my project, such as the number of render nodes that are available to them and the application sessions that they can run. I can set hard limits on these, or I can set limits for over time. Being able to manage my costs in a clear and predictable way is something that's really easy to do here in Elara. One of the powerful aspects of Elara is that it's aware of the context in which you're opening an application. I'm just going to connect some storage here. And we can connect a Dropbox or a Google Cloud or a Google Drive. What I actually did is I uploaded all my footage to a Google Cloud storage. And I'm just going to connect that storage here to my account. We can also upload your footage to an Amazon S3 and connect that data to your account. So I just need to fill in my Google Cloud storage credentials. And once I do that, all of the data is going to be accessible to all of the apps that I run and all of my team members. So now that my bucket's connected, this data is accessible to them, and they can get working. I'm going to create a new project within my organization. I'm going to name it Unremarkable. That's the name of the film. We can also manage our project with its own settings. We can add users per project, add permissions per project, etc. So let's have a look at how the data is actually connected to the project. We have a data tab up here at the top. And when I go to data, it's going to show me the different cloud buckets which have been connected. We can navigate folders here. And I'm going to check that my raw footage is indeed connected. So here's my raw footage. And it's really nice to be able to do this right in the Elara dashboard. Elara allows me to launch applications on demand right in the web. All you need is a web browser, and you can access Nuke, V-Ray, Houdini, potentially any professional tool. Elara will provision a high-end GPU-enabled server, which is going to run your app, and it's also going to provide a high-performance remote screen session for you to interact with the app. It's really great that all my data is actually connected to the apps. Nothing has to be downloaded locally. Elara is an open platform, meaning that it's not only Foundry apps. We also have apps from other vendors. I'm going to be embracing Houdini as it's part of my workflow. One of the powerful aspects of Elara is that it's aware of the context in which you're opening an application. This means that Elara can configure the environment, plugins, and layout to suit the project that you're currently in. Elara is able to track the usage per project and per user, which gives you a lot of valuable insight. I'm just going to open up Nuke Studio, as that's where I'm going to manage and start my project. So I'm just going to launch Nuke Studio here. And when we launch Nuke Studio, we get a new tab that points to the application running in the cloud. Look, this is Nuke Studio running in a web browser. It's amazing. I love it. We can even have multiple applications open at one time, and it's not going to bog down our system at all. It's pretty amazing to have access to all these different applications, and there's no need for any sort of complicated licensing or upfront commitments. So I'm just going to start working on this film by conforming the footage. I imported an XML, and that in turn imported all of my raw footage. And now I'm viewing the footage here, and this is all on the cloud. And now I'm just going to import a reference cut. My editor has sent me a new cut that I have on the cloud. Notice that I can actually just browse to all this media here in Nuke Studio. Nothing has to be downloaded or uploaded. It's all already attached and shared. So I just loaded my raw footage into one buffer here in Nuke Studio and my reference edit in another buffer. I'm going to start conforming the project. I'm just changing the color space here, and I'm going to apply a Nuke Studio soft effect to this footage. I'm going to attach a LUT that my colorist has sent me. A Nuke Studio soft effect is a GPU-enabled effect. It's really nice that we're running this Nuke session in a GPU-enabled session, because it means that we're actually getting the benefit of those GPU speeds. This means that I can run this effect in real time. So I'm going to play back the footage here and make sure everything's in sync. So what we have here is ARRI ProRes 444 files. That's very large files with a reference cut and a GPU effect, all caching and playing back in real time. The interactivity is really great. It feels good. You forget you're working in a web browser pretty quickly. So I'm going to start making some annotations. I'm going to give my compositor some notes so he knows exactly what he needs to do with this shot. He's going to have to remove these tracks. That might be obvious for him. He's going to have some work to do on these walls, and he has some rotoing to do over here. So now that the compositor has all the notes he needs, we can create a comp. And when we create a comp, it's going to create a new directory with everything needed to start working on the shot. And because we're working in shared storage, my compositor immediately has access to this new directory that's been created. It's just one of the little benefits that you get with always working on a shared storage system. I'm going to jump forward in this comp a little. I was actually the compositor, so I'm just going to move over to Nuke and get to a point where we're ready to do our first render. So I could render this with this Nuke Studio session, and it's going to render on a 32-core computer on the cloud, which is actually faster than my computer that I have locally. But because we're using Elara, we have the power of cloud rendering, which we can take advantage of. We can provision as many render servers as we want, even into the thousands. We're only limited by our quotas, which of course we maintain full control over. So this is a truly dynamic render farm. It only exists as long as there's a job for it to do. Unlike a traditional studio, I don't need to have a bunch of hardware laying around that's quickly depreciating. Elara is also unique because all of our data sits in the cloud alongside the render nodes. There's nothing that needs to be uploaded for the render to start. I can just select how many nodes I'd like to start rendering with. In this case, 10 should be enough to get going pretty quickly. So I'm going to set 10 nodes and submit job. Now I can go to my compute tab up here in Elara, and I can see the job that's just been launched. I can also go to the compute nodes tab. It's going to show me the individual nodes that have been launched to start this. So as this render gets going, we're actually going to go over back to Simon's computer. He's going to continue with the pipeline. Remember that I'm working on this shot here in the US. Simon was working on this shot in the UK. So as a VFX supervisor, Elara allows me to pull together a team. It makes it really simple. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Nathan. Yes, so I normally work on a MacBook, and obviously using Katana on OS X is a little bit tricky, but with Elara, it's not a problem. I can use any computer. You could even use a tablet. So let's say it's breakfast time here in the UK, and I want to see what Nathan's been up to. So when I log in, I can see that there's a new organization available. I've always wanted to work for Nathan FX. By selecting this project, I have access to the same production environment that Nathan set up, the same shared data set. Now, I like to think of myself as the rock star artist of the team, if you like. I can model in Modo, can paint in Mari. And since we're all sharing the same storage, it's really easy to import assets into Katana. So as you can see here, we've already imported the camera from Nuke, the models from Modo, and the textures from Mari. Now this is a Katana session with V-Ray installed out the box, and that's a really convenient configuration to have available, at the click of a button. So here we're just about to connect the foreground plate that Nathan rendered out earlier. This is going to give me the reference I need to light the shot properly. As Nathan said, the interactivity of this session is really great, and Elara achieves this by running the app locally to me to provide minimum latency. We're using the live render with V-Ray in Katana here. I'm going to tweak a few of the settings. We want to create a nice eerie atmosphere. We want to make sure that background sits in the scene properly. Perfect. So now that the scene is lit, we want to kick off a render. Similar to Nuke, Katana can use Elara's cloud computing capabilities. This means I can instantly create a Katana V-Ray render farm of any number of nodes. I could use a modest farm of, say, 10 nodes, but we've got a demanding schedule, and my compositor is a bit impatient. So I'm going to splurge. I'm going to kick off a render farm of 701 nodes. That's one node for each frame of the sequence, 5,608 cores. That basically means that we're going to render in the whole sequence in the same time it takes to do one frame. So over in Houdini, we can see that this CG render of a morgue is lacking a bit of life. Thank you. So we're going to give the scene some volumetrics, and Houdini is obviously the perfect app for this. So we've already set up this Misty simulation. It's ready to be rendered. Rendering a Houdini simulation on Elara is great. This cloud machine has 208 gigabytes of RAM, so I can render some pretty big simulations. Got a couple of choices here. We could use Houdini's mantra, or we could export the scene as open VDB for use in Katana with V-Ray, along with the rest of our scene. I want to keep the project pretty simple, so we're going to send the cache out and use it in Katana. So as the scene caches now, we can switch back to the Data tab and see and check that, what's happening. We can see in this folder here that our VDB files are beginning to be populated into that folder with our new Houdini data. This is really valuable, of course, because everybody else in the team has instant access to this data. So now that the simulation is finished and we've got our cache, we're ready. Our compositor can keep on working and finish the comp. So go, Nathan.
Thank you, Simon. I can start compositing with the images he's rendered out the moment that they're finished. So I've just imported them here into Nuke. I have his render. And I've actually already put together a little bit of a comp. The shot is almost done now. We're getting to a point where it would be really nice if Simon and I could work together to kind of key in the final look of the film. Well, Elara allows you to do this in a completely new, collaborative way. It's completely unique to Elara. We can just copy the URL for the session, send it over. Now we're going to pop over to Simon's computer, and we can see him opening that URL. Now we're sharing a session. So now we're both in this Elara session, and we can collaborate, talk about the changes that need to be done. We have some lighting changes in the background. Simon did a pretty good job lighting. He got it 90% of the way there, but we're just going to get it the rest of the way. Take a little bit of green. Good idea, Simon. Well, at any point, since Simon knows what to do, he can take over control of this session. Now we can just bounce ideas back and forth. We can both have control of the session. We can interactively work together. Remember, you could actually do this with any of the Elara apps. We could be in Houdini or Katana. So now Simon's brought it the rest of the way there. We agree that it's pretty much ready to be rendered. He can leave the session at any time, and I can continue working. I'm just going to start a new Elara compute render. So with our new Elara compute tab in Nuke, I'm going to go in here and set a new render with 25 nodes. That's enough to get this sequence back in a few minutes. As this renders, I'm going to bring you over to our reports page. Remember how I said that the apps I used are assigned to particular projects? Well, Elara is constantly capturing all sorts of data about how we're using the system. This gives me meaningful insights into my costs, usage patterns, and my team, which I've never had before. If I switch to the reports page here, I can see what my team's been up to. This is a list of all the sessions that we've used in this project. I can see we've been busy for a total of 60 hours and 28 minutes. And I'm especially interested in seeing how much time we've spent rendering. So we can go through and filter by user or by application. And now I've just filtered out the Katana and V-Ray nodes. I can see we've been rendering with Katana and V-Ray for 21 hours. And it's nice to see that even though I had to splurge on that really large render earlier, Elara used its quota system to keep my costs down to a minimum. These kind of metrics are really important to me as a visual effects supervisor. They let me have all sorts of information, like how much time we spent working on the project, different data for different apps, and things like what time Simon decided to start to get to work yesterday. Isn't that right, Simon?
Moving swiftly on, please.
So let's have a look at the final result of this shot. Elara allows me to retrieve my files from the cloud and store them locally at any time. This makes it really easy for me to pass deliverables on to my clients or to work with somebody we can collaborate with people who aren't on the cloud. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nathan. So let's just recap on what we've seen. Elara allowed Nathan to create a completely virtual post-production company and to organize the people around the world to work on his project. He was able to centralize and share all his data, and the team were able to collaborate seamlessly. Nathan and team had access to a full range of high-end VFX tools at their fingertips. These were available on demand without the need for any expensive workstations or upfront commitments. The team could also summon a powerful and dynamic render farm of any size, particularly suited to their needs at that particular moment. And finally, Nathan was able to inspect how every penny and CPU cycle has been used and use this information to provide valuable insights into how his team is working. This is the promise of Elara. So Elara is a project in active development, and we'd like to invite you to register your interest at elara.io. You'll have the opportunity to receive regular updates, as well as register for a beta user. We're expecting to go into beta in summer 2017. So I'd like to thank you in advance for your interest in Elara, and we're really excited to offer this whole new and modern way of working by leveraging the cloud. And we hope that you'll join us on this journey. So thank you very much.